Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending tonight's event. It's the third online forum on the future use of the Charles, Dana, and Anna Hunt Marsh Bridges and Island. This is a program that's being sponsored by what's a citizens group called the Hinsdale-Brattleboro Existing Bridges Subcommittee. And I just want to go through a couple of housekeeping things before I turn it over to Patrick. I'm hoping everybody can see the screen in front of you. I wanted to let everyone know that this meeting is being recorded. The reason for this is we'd like to post it on the website later, hopefully sometime early next week, and we'll also be submitting it to Brattleboro Community Television, who likes to air these events as well. This program will go until 8 p.m. more or less. If you can, please keep your microphone muted for the duration of the meeting. If you're not sure how to do that, you just click on your picture. If you hover a mouse over your picture, there's a mute button. The reason we're doing that is because sometimes there's audio feedback issues with the presenters, so we want to avoid that if we can. If you have any questions or have any comments, we really want to hear from you. And please use the chat box feature at the bottom of your screen to leave those questions or comments. If we don't have a lot of questions or comments towards the end of the program, we can open it up and we can have people raise their hands and ask questions. The way to raise your hand is, again, to click on the screen showing your own face and click on the three dots. And I believe through that feature, you can raise your hands. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. Please, this is we're hoping to have really constructive dialogue here. We're going to have lots of opportunity for folks participating in today's program to ask questions and provide comments, but please try to keep everything civil. The agenda tonight is pretty straightforward. We're going to start off with Patrick Moreland soon, who's a co-chair of the subcommittee with a welcome introductions and some context. Then we'll hear a presentation on the conceptual plan for the future use of the bridges in Hinsdale Island from Christopher Ramage, a University of Massachusetts graduate student. And then we'll do questions and answers. But before we dig into that, I want to hand off the mic to Don Lyford from New Hampshire DOT. He's the project manager for the Hinsdale-Brattleboro bridge projects, not only the existing bridges, but also the new bridge that's going in. And I understand, Don, that there's some good news to report.
Thank you, JB. Yeah, good news. We finally have advertised the new bridge so contractors can start putting together their bids. We'll give them until April 22nd to submit the bids. At that time, we'll open them up and hopefully get some very competitive bids. There were, I think, 7 general contractors that had taken out packages last time I looked.
That's excellent. And this is not an April Fool's joke.
Correct.
Okay, thanks for that, Don. And Patrick, why don't we go ahead and kick things off?
Excellent. Thank you, JB. And thank you, Don. That really is good news. This is a long time coming for this region, and it's good to see, material forward progress. So I want to start by just thanking everybody for coming out on a Thursday evening to take a look at the vision, which has been evolving over the last maybe 3 years for reuse of the existing bridges and the island in New Hampshire. As JB pointed out, my name is Patrick Moreland. I'm the co-chair along with Catherine Lynch, my counterpart at Town of Hinsdale. Together, we have been helping along the existing bridges subcommittee to bring you what you're going to take a look at this evening, which has been an evolving vision for the reuse of the islands and the bridges. I'll just quickly mention who's on the committee just so that everyone has a clear understanding. The committee is composed of Steve Barrett, Mark Kerrigan, Jason Cooper, Steve Diorio, Charles Ratage, Drew Hazelton, Catherine Lynch, Prudence McKinney, myself, Fred Podlinski, Ed Smith, Sharon Smith, and Adam Grinold. So it's been a good group, and a group that is made up of both folks from Brattleboro and from town of Hinsdale. I'd like to take an opportunity before I talk too much about the context and just thank our staff support. Since the very beginning, JB Mack from Southwest Regional Planning Commission has been supporting our work, and we are all deeply appreciative of the efforts that he has given us. And I think it's also important to point out that New Hampshire DOT and VTrans have both spent a good deal of time at each of our meetings and providing information that have helped to guide the product, which we'll be taking a look at this evening. I want to pay particular attention to Don Lyford and thank him for his service. He's been to each and every existing bridges subcommittee, and we thank him for his work to help move this project forward. The subcommittee's charge is to develop a vision for the bridges and for the island. And very early on in our work, we set out some goals for what we thought would be useful for the vision. We wanted to make sure that we had a vision which could strengthen the social and economic relationship between the two states and the two communities. One that would promote active transportation like walking and bicycling and kayaking and that type of thing. Enhance recreation opportunities and river access. Preserve the integrity of natural, historic, and cultural resources. Conserve local fiscal resources and to ensure that the area would remain safe and clean. We think those are important components of any vision for this area. I'd like to make really clear what our charge is not. Our charge is not to implement this project. We believe that developing a vision is the very beginning of our process. And this process is one which is likely to take quite a while. There will be costs. I think we can all recognize that. There could potentially be a change in ownership. Some entity is going to need to move forward with a capital project. Some entity is going to need to operate and maintain the facility and provide essential public safety services to those who are visiting the island. Who those parties will be remains to be seen. Our effort has been to define a vision, one that we can provide to the various political entities that will be considering this, and to let them know what is possible and what is desirable. Also, very early on in our process, we recognized that we would need some technical assistance, and not just somebody who could be an artist and develop pretty pictures, but somebody who could really help us to take concepts and ideas and turn them into real practical opportunities. So we reached out to the UMass Amherst Department of Landscape Architecture and Regional Planning, where we met Dr. Robert Ryan. Initially, we began work with some of his undergrad students, and their work was impressive and brought out all sorts of ideas we hadn't really thought of before. It was such a meaningful engagement that we recognized very quickly we needed to take this to the next level. So Wyndham Regional Commission, Southwest Regional Planning, Town of Hinsdale and Town of Brattleboro pooled our financial resources, and we were able to put together a stipend for a more formal engagement with a master's candidate within the program. That candidate turned out to be Christopher Ramage. I think many of you have met him, at least on these types of meetings before, and we are deeply appreciative of the work that he's been doing with us and work that he's been doing on behalf of the people who live in our region. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and I'm sure we'll be, I guess one final point I'd like to make is that the purpose of tonight, in addition to Chris sort of giving us the reveal and showing us where the vision has continued to evolve, is to hear from you. We need to hear your feedback. We need to hear what you like, what you don't like. All of that is going to be incorporated into our final report, which we envision beginning work on later this summer. And with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Christopher Ramage.
Thank you, Patrick. Let me go ahead and get my screen share up. It's great to see so many people coming out tonight. I know meetings in the evening are never our favorite, but often the only time we can get everyone together. A lot of people have contributed to this work, members of the public from previous meetings, everyone on the subcommittee, the 2 planning commissions involved, as well as DOT from both states, Department of Environmental Protection in New Hampshire, and the contractors for the existing bridge work, Hoyle, Tanner and Associates. So I just want to quickly thank everyone who has been involved and whose input has influenced the project so far. So tonight I'm here to present sort of work to date. It's been going on for almost a year now on a concept for the existing bridges in Hinsdale Island that I'm calling a living river, balancing recreation and conservation along the Hinsdale Island Greenway. So without further ado, let's get started. Just real quick, the way this presentation is going to go is I'm going to spend a few minutes outlining previous work and then a fair bit of time walking us through the conceptual design. After that, I'll go through some more slides looking at specialized aspects of the design, such as different access plans, disturbance diagrams, conceptual planting plans, and lighting plans. And then at the very end, we'll have briefly mention next steps, but then try to reserve most of the rest of this meeting for hopefully some great questions and comments that we'll get to. So this project, at least my involvement in it, began back in the spring and over the summer with site visits to the island and the existing bridges. And it's really quite an interesting site. The island was observed being used in a number of ways by locals, from fishing, walking and hiking, to simply a pedestrian and bike connection across the river, scenic viewing, and as well as, you know, sort of informal signs of use, such as informal trails, clearings on the island, reuse of otherwise discarded items. It's also a very important site for water recreation and water access. There's currently an official boat access point on the island, which is being planned to be moved several miles further downriver on the New Hampshire side, when, you know, years down the road, access to this one on the island is ceased. Numerous water boating activities, kayaking activities were observed around the island. And just stepping back a bit, it's a really unique site because it spans from this very urban feeling end of downtown Brattleboro in the westernmost limit of the site, across the Connecticut River and almost to the edge of the Wontosticate mountain and associated forests. And then in the middle of it, we have these bridges in this island with a rich use of history, where sort of these natural systems and human systems intersect. So we sort of run the whole range of place types within this one site. And that leads to great opportunities to create rich experiences. So over the fall, a lot of in-depth site analysis was done. And just a handful of those I'll point out here, looking at urbanization, existing patterns of urbanization, existing plant communities, existing flood risk according to FEMA maps for the Connecticut River, the soil types, whether the soils are hydric or not, and invasive plant pressure. And these, along with many other aspects that were looked at, went into informing initial design concepts and strategies related to designing for flood resilience, designing for recreation and recreational opportunities, as well as vegetation management and habitat restoration plans. Just a few more examples of how this was looked at, you know, across from one end of the island to the other in several different spots. And so over this last almost year, we've had a number of presentations, including 2 previous public presentations, one in October and one in December, along with many more to just the members of the subcommittee in between these, during which we garnered feedback, which was used to inform how this design developed. One thing that came out of some of the more formal surveys during previous public meetings was an emphasis on recreation and environmental concerns as being very important to people who participated in the survey. And then when talking about activities on the island and the bridges, participants really prioritizing viewing wildlife habitat and wildlife observation, along with performance spaces and recreational opportunities. And so we've really tried to take this feedback at each step and alter and move these ideas forward to come up with a richer and richer design. And so here we have a master plan, bird's eye overview of the current working design concept. Very briefly, the greenway, proposed greenway, starts at the southern limit of downtown Brattleboro's Main Street, comes down an expanded pedestrian way along Bridge Street and crosses the Anahunt Marsh Bridge onto the western edge of the island. This western edge of the island is the most intensively used in this proposed design scheme, with a number of gathering and recreational spaces that we'll zoom in on and talk about in just a moment. As you move out to either the northern end or eastward to the eastern half of the island, it becomes less intensively used, more of a focus on paths, of providing for scenic and wildlife viewing platforms, and of conserving important wetland plant communities. On the westernmost edge, reusing an existing and older bridge footing as a fishing pier. This is just north of entering the Charles Dana Bridge, continuing over the Charles Dana Bridge and terminating on the current Route 119 access way by the intersection with Mountain Street in Hinsdale. So zooming in on that eastern end of the island, or western edge of the island, excuse me, as you arrive on it from the Anahunt Marsh Bridge, you are greeted with an expanded, widened greenway. This includes the existing road base as well as the informal shoulder, part of the current unpaved parking area off of the current Route 119. This is a flexible space, Greenway Plaza. It can be used for events. You can bring food trucks onto here, some light movable infrastructure to support activities as needed. To the north, the existing steep roadway embankment is utilized as a rock scramble. And then to the south, we locate the public performance space, a small amphitheater, minimal paving, low intensity development, but flexible space with ADA accessible ramped pathways down to the performance space, as well as a ramp that continues down to the next space on the river's edge, the Riverside Picnic Space in Kayakers Cove, providing that public water access to its edge. The secondary path that wraps around the edge of the island to a boardwalk that cuts underneath the Anahunt Marsh Bridge provides for non-permanent but public motorboat access and docking slips. And then on the bottom left-hand corner, you can see you're starting to exit this more developed space into the more linear greenway with an example of a viewing platform looking over part of the conserved marsh. Adjacent to this amphitheater is where we're proposing a small public restroom be put in. And you can see that right here under my mouse. So now we're gonna walk through some of these spaces. You can try and orient yourself to the overall map, looking in the top right-hand corner where you have a purple view shed representing where this illustration is meant to depict within the larger scheme of things. And so here, we're starting out close to the entrance of the Anahunt Marsh Bridge on a busy day. For example, perhaps a music festival with local performances taking place on the island, drawing in crowds from the surrounding communities. As we continue onto the island and we enter that initial entryway plaza, again, seeing how this larger space can support flexible programming, such as bringing on food trucks to the island for events or to support other programming. And then moving along a little bit further and turning to our right, we look down into a sketch perspective of the amphitheater space. This is going to be enclosed by plantings on either side, but with view sheds to the water provided for. And so here we just see another rendering of the amphitheater, this time in section, the perspective in the back, again, showing how once the space is cleared and graded, replanting to create that sense of enclosure on the sides and in the back so that you have separation between the performance space and the greenway. Further and closer to the water's edge, looking at the island from the water, we see Kayakers Cove and the Riverside picnic space depicted here. You can also see in the background on the left side, the amphitheater through some of the plantings. Now our next view is going to be as if you walked along the edge of the island out of frame to the left back towards the base of the Cattail Marsh Bridge, where you come to the new boardwalk docks as illustrated here and looking out from under the bridge towards the Brattleboro skyline. Next, we're going to continue along this boardwalk around the bridge abutment onto the northern edge of the island. And then looking back again towards Brattleboro in the distance. Here we see an illustration of the rock scramble. Missing in this illustration is the proposed pathway with steps that will be adjacent to provide for an alternate and more direct means down to the bottom in this path at its base. Swinging out on a less permanent trail to a viewing platform on the northernmost end of the island, we get a chance to for wildlife and scenic viewing, looking upriver, and then to our left or the west, again, the Brattleboro skyline, to the right or the east, Wontosticate Mountain. Now we're moving further down the greenway, closer to the Charles Dana Bridge, which you can see in the background here. Just again, an illustration of the feeling of this greenway, how it's going to be partially enclosed with low landform and herbaceous plantings. And you can see on the right, a secondary path that leads out to a second viewing platform looking south or downriver over the southern part of the island in the marsh. Continuing on to the Charles Dana and looking back at the island, we see a rendering of the fishing pier with proposed conditions, railings for safety, some seating introduced, slight clearing of vegetation to create more room and easier casting. Finally, again, looking back towards the island from the Charles Dana Bridge, thinking about this space not just in the warm season, but in the cool season that we have quite a lot of up here in New England. And so this rendering is during a snowstorm. Again, looking back, you can see the glow of Brattleboro in the distance. You have a few, in this case, cross-country skiers packing it in early evening after a day out recreating. You also see an example of how space along the bridges can be used for community art, as well as creating seating spaces and viewing opportunities. So with that, we're going to step back and now talk briefly about both regional and site-specific access plans. Here we're looking at a regional access plan and thinking about this project in the larger context of the two communities and the surrounding landscape. The pink dashed lines show existing trail systems. In the top, we see the West River Trail. To the right of the island, we see the Wontosticate-Monadnock Trail, along with its branches and sub-trails. And then towards the bottom part, we see the existing extent of the Fort Hill Rail Trail, which runs all the way down to downtown Hinsdale. Now, this dashed green line shows the proposed footprint of the Hinsdale Island Greenway, making that critical non-vehicular connection across the river between the two states and two communities. The white dashed lines running from the end of the Greenway south, connecting up with the Fort Hill Rail Trail, and then on the other side of the river north to connect up with the West River Trail, show potential future connections that can be sort of final steps in weaving the existing trail networks on either side of the river together. Now to talk about site-specific access. First of all, parking. We'll have parking available on both sides of the river. On the left-hand side, we see the Amtrak lot, both existing but also bumped out a bit based on proposed plans for the new Amtrak station. We have a drop-off area sort of at the easternmost terminus of the Greenway, as well as parking available in the Runnings lot. The owner has said she is open to allowing a portion of the lot be used for public parking to access any future recreational park facilities that may be completed as a part of this project. Currently, this one ADA parking spot you see off of Mountain Road will not be made, and that's because just recently, in fact last week, we were made aware that we were using an incorrect property boundary for an adjacent parcel just north of how the project boundary is currently drawn. And so this section on the New Hampshire shoreline, this current proposal for water access will be reworked in future plans. And so this will change, and we will not have room for a parking spot right there. We will look for alternatives. Emergency vehicle access is provided for along the main spine, with the plaza giving the opportunity for turnarounds of all but the full-size fire engine, and this decision was made in conjunction with local police and fire chiefs. They said that turning around a full engine would not be necessary, but turnaround of smaller vehicles would be helpful. And so that's what we have provided. Again, bike access, similarly, along the main spine of the Greenway, with some proposed bike rack, bike parking, if you will, spots at both ends. Again, easternmost terminus adjacent to Mountain Road, and then on the western side where the Hunt Marsh Bridge touches down by Whetstone Brewery. And then on the island, providing for bike parking off the main plaza, adjacent to the proposed restrooms, and then on the eastern side, adjacent to the fishing pier. Boat and kayak access. You have an existing launch point in Norm's Marina, dock and launch just south of our project. We're proposing kayak access on both sides of the river. Again, the kayak access location on the New Hampshire side of the river may be changed in the future, again, due to a reworking of this section in future plans. Proposing off of the existing turnaround just past the Amtrak station, a ramp down to a floating launch point on the Brattleboro side. Kayakers Cove offers a place to sort of beach, if you will, your kayaks on the island, while the boardwalk docks allow for motorboat tie-up during the day. This diagram shows all of the existing trails, or not existing, but proposed trails that would allow for pedestrian access. The dashed lines in red would be trails that either due to grade or material are not ADA accessible. And as you can see, those are relatively limited. So a lot of effort was put into providing for the option to have very widely accessible spaces and path systems on this island. The path systems were also designed with flooding in mind, using the 100-year, in other words, the 1% flood risk, this 1% storm event as a benchmark. And so highlighted in blue, you see the secondary path systems off of what's now the main roadway embankment would flood during a 100-year storm. However, the main spine of the Greenway will not. So that will remain accessible during a flooding event. Locations of more developed areas and gathering places were informed quite heavily by existing wetland boundaries and their plant communities, so that we can locate all areas that would require disturbance outside of the wetland boundary delineations. Therefore, not just conserve, but minimize impact during construction activities on these sensitive plant communities and ecosystems. Briefly, we're going to run through the conceptual planting plan. It serves to reinforce as well as sort of rehabilitate or restore existing plant communities on the island, with the exception of the herbaceous upland meadow, because this is primarily going to be planted in areas that are currently either road shoulder or areas of the existing roadside that would be removed per this proposal. So you can see its footprint hugs the main spine of the greenway, mostly within the boundary of the existing roadway and its shoulders. And again, this is primarily going to be ornamental warm season grasses and flowering forbs in wildflowers. Adjacent to this, on the embankments of the roadway, what we currently have is a highly invaded, however, red maple, red oak, cinnamon fern forest typology. And so we are going to be managing to maintain and enhance this. Again, here's just a smattering of pictures of some of the main community members: that red maple, your red oak, and your cinnamon fern. Adjacent areas of floodplain forest are, again, where they're disturbed, they will be replanted with appropriate plant species. Otherwise, they're primarily going to be managed to remove invasive plant species and give advantage to the more productive native species that we desire there. And so again, a smattering of the tree and understory types of plants you would see in this plant community. We have two types of non-forested hydric soils. We have a basically shrub wetland on the northeastern edge of the island, an alder, dogwood, arrowwood, alluvial thicket. And largely this is going to remain untouched, except for a small section of replanting around the proposed viewing platform on the northern tip. Again, the plant palette for such a plant community. Then almost the entire southern half of the island is Cattail Marsh with some sparse wooded areas already existing. And this is purposely been avoided for any type of development. The entirety of this will be conserved so that we continue to support this rich existing plant community that we find here. Now, briefly, taking a look at a conceptual lighting plan. The big takeaways here is that this conceptual lighting plan would require to maintain electricity to the island. It envisions lighting the main spine of the greenway from shoreline to shoreline, and the performance space. And the performance space could be optional lighting that's turned on when it's used, but otherwise not. That's very flexible. There's two types of lighting used to light the path system. Lamp lighting, which, if we work from left to right on the screen, starts at the far left near downtown Brattleboro, continues all the way across the bridge and through the plaza, and then is combined with Ballard lighting through the less developed sections of the greenway, the more not remote, but sort of more heavily conserved half of the island, to limit light pollution while still providing adequate safety and path lighting. And then as we enter the bridge, the Charles Dana Bridge on the eastern end, returning to just lamp lighting for the rest of the way until we hit Mountain Road. In section showing both bridges, the Charles Dana cut two ways on the top, the Anna Hunt Marsh cut two ways on the bottom, illustrating both the lamp lighting used to light the greenway itself, but also a third type of lighting, smaller LED accent lighting used along the two arches on either bridge and their main cross beams, top cross beams, to accent and highlight the bridge superstructure at night. Whether you go exactly with this color or something different, that's, completely, everything's up for input at this point and change. But one thing I would recommend is sticking to a red to amber color range, as this reduces impacts on insects and birds and other wildlife at night. Ballard lighting has been used in similar projects located in similar sort of adjacencies to downtown communities, such as the Animas River Trail extension adjacent to downtown Durango, Colorado. As shown here is the local town planner and landscape architect setting up demonstrations of different types of bollard lighting, different lighting intensities for the community to look at. Again, just reinforcing that we're just talking about 3 lighting types: 1 accent lighting type, a main lamp lighting type, and a bollard lighting type. And again, it's not to recommend these specific fixtures here, but just to visualize what these 3 different types of lighting look like. Lastly, just the last few minutes before we get to open it up for questions and comments, going over a few of the more innovative design features in this proposal. One is what's being called a citizen science and education transect. I'll show that some more in a minute. 2, using leaky dams, as shown in this blue section on the northeastern edge of the island. This is located in a shallow but existing intermittent channel. It fills during flooding events, and due to the angle, this channel feeds water that then impacts the existing road base. And so using leaky dams, as we'll see in just a second, to help slow that water, perhaps fill in that channel slightly over time to reduce water velocities in flood events. And then the use of compost blankets and the sort of herbaceous meadow community to help reduce soil erosion during establishment, as well as aid in the establishment of the species. So here are a few quick sort of napkin sketches of what this visualizing a transect or a line across the island might look like. And you might ask, well, why might we want to do this? One, it provides an opportunity to bring the language of these old school industrial bridges onto the island, using old school I-beams with rivets like you see in the superstructures as the markers themselves. And 2, this provides a flexible sort of artistic series of what can become data gathering points on the island, either for educational purposes. Local classrooms or schools can come on here, and at different elevations you can observe what's going on with the soil, what's going on with the temperature and the feeling, the exposure of sun and shade. What sort of plants do you see on the roadside edge? What sort of plants do you see once you get into hydric soils closer to the floodplain? It can be used to really back up a lot of ecology lessons using a real life example in the community. On the other hand, it could also be used for more formalized citizen science initiatives that could develop over time to monitor what's going on the island in terms of different animal populations, plant community establishments and shifts over time, and inform sort of how well a design that is instituted performs. Here, seeing a few sketches of the leaky dam concept, it's sort of what it sounds like. And using, in this case, brush bundles roped together and then anchoring them in between stakes to create a semi-permeable barrier to water movement. So this allows the water through, but it slows it down. And when the water slows down, not only does it cause less erosion, but it will also, downstream of each leaky barrier, drop more sediments out of suspension. The idea is that over time, not only do you initially get erosion reduction and help protect the road base, but over time you may actually raise the ground level slightly in this intermittent channel and start to fill it up, so it's no longer a threat. And then finally, the idea of compost blankets on slopes being used to reduce erosion. Now, this has been studied extensively, or decently extensively, by Mass DOT in this state. I helped out with that a bit over the last few years. It's quite promising, and this is an opportunity to use this in conjunction with landforms to create enhanced spatial feelings along the greenway to, again, boost our knowledge of this. We know it works, but we want to know how, exactly how it works best. And so you can create landforms at different slopes using the fill material from cutting operations. And then again, simple monitoring over time using stakes and intermittent measurements. So thanks for sticking with me. It looks like we've still got a fair amount of time, which is great. So we can open it up for questions and comments and all of the above. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start with some questions that I received in the chat. This is from Peggy Hart, and she asks, as the dam relicensing negotiations progress, what water levels may be different from the historical FEMA map? Will you be adjusting as the water levels may change?
So that's a good question, and you're very right. That relicensing process is in the works right now. However, that really affects sort of non-flood event water levels, but not flood event water levels. When you have a significant flooding event, the current dam infrastructure, it's not really made to regulate that. It's made to regulate the non-flooding event flows and water levels. So the FEMA flood maps and their associated elevations for, say, a 100-year flood shouldn't change based on however the current relicensing process works out.
Thank you, Chris. A question similar to that was, considering climate change and weather extremes, please characterize flood dangers.
Yes, so that's definitely something that we want to keep in mind moving forward. Is, not only do we experience flood events now, but likely over the future you will get more frequent, more severe flooding events. And so I think this design is certainly moving in the right direction for an approach to the island, because it minimizes intensive development on the island. It minimizes hard surfaces. In fact, when you run the calculations, I don't have the exact number on me, but we have a net reduction in paved surfaces and paved infrastructure on this island, compared to the existing road base with this plan. So that's certainly a plus. Planning to maintain the backbone of the greenway above 100-year floodway elevation certainly was a design decision informed by the fact that we want to maintain access during flooding events, as well as minimizing development in this northernmost corner. In this case, specifically thinking about ice flows and how that can impact the upriver end of the island, and instead focusing in on the more sheltered downriver facing edge of the island. That was another design decision that was informed by sort of thinking about these flooding and or ice jam events.
Thank you. We had a couple comments about food trucks being on the island, since we did state that it was for emergency vehicles only.
Any specific questions, or just to talk generally to that point?
They said, why are they closed? If the bridges are closed to motorized vehicles, why are we allowing food trucks? Why not just have them at each access to each bridge?
You certainly could. The food trucks are not being proposed as a permanent, like every day there's, when the weather's nice, there's food trucks there. It's more to demonstrate that you have the ability to bring movable infrastructure such as concessions associated with food trucks onto the island if you wish, say to support a local theater performance in the amphitheater. Now you have food available, a restroom available, both within a very convenient walk from the amphitheater. But that's certainly a management decision that the communities would get to make on an ongoing and normal basis. But on day-to-day, the current vision is that, the islands will not be accessible to any type of motorized vehicles. There's going to be bollards on either end that blocks them, and these bollards will be removable. And so if emergency access is needed, the personnel can remove the bollards and quickly get onto the island.
Okay, thank you. We had a question. How impactful will the traffic be from the new bridge on the island? Will it be visually or audibly?
So I know this has come up a few times in previous meetings, and you know, if say Don wants to step in and speak to the noise from the bridge, my memory is that the thinking is that you're relatively not going to hear that much. You certainly will have much less noise than the existing conditions, in which case, you know, all that traffic is running right down the middle of the island currently. And as to, you know, views, basically, you will see the bridge, but only where you have views out of the island, right? The majority of this greenway is flanked by fairly large canopy trees, which screen the view quite well. But, you know, where you have views out of the island, such as, say, this more eastern viewing platform, yeah, you will be able to see sections of the new bridge, you know, over the water body.
To just give a sense of the bridge height, the new proposed bridge, my understanding is that the deck will be about as high as the tops of where the arches are of the Anna Hunt Marsh Bridge and the Charles Dana Bridge. So they'll be quite high.
Thanks, JB. That's a good point. So yes, you know, even when they are visible, they're not, say, blocking your views to sort of the horizon line downriver. You will be able to see to the horizon line downriver underneath of the bridges.
Okay, thank you. There were some questions about solar lighting. Would it be possible to have solar lighting instead of having electrical lines on the bridges?
Certainly possible. It may limit, you know, your lighting choices. And then one other thing to consider is that the main part of this greenway, you know, it primarily runs east to west, and we have a very tall existing canopy that comes right up against it that we want to maintain. And so that also brings into the question feasibility, if you'll get enough, you know, solar light to all sections of the pathway to, you know, provide the desired amount of lighting and desired duration of lighting through the night. And then the only other thing to consider is it takes a bit more effort in my admittedly limited understanding to completely waterproof solar lighting features, which you will want to do, because even though the main stem of the greenway is above the 100-year flood mark, the entirety of this island, I believe, is below the 500-year flood mark. So, you know, one freak storm, you don't want that to wipe out all of your lighting. You want to make sure you're using waterproof lighting fixtures.
Chris, if I could add, I think one other consideration, something that the subcommittee's talked about a little bit, is if you need electricity on the island, let's say for events at the amphitheater, it would be a benefit to have electricity to the island.
Yes, thanks, JP.
None of this is set in stone, though. It's really important to this is a vision. This is just building an idea that we're trying to build an idea that's supported by the community. So we have a target as to what the communities could do with the space in the future.
I'd like to ask a question, please.
Can I get to you in a minute, Bernie? I'm trying to get through all these questions first.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next question I have were about the toilets. Are they going to be composting?
That's the current thinking. And again, as JB pointed out, you know, everything is subject to change because we're at such an early, strictly visioning stage in the project. But you know, due to regulations around non-composting toilets and bringing in sewage infrastructure and, you know, distances between existing wetlands, a waterproof composting toilet system so far seems preferable, at least to, you know, us who've been working on it. But again, we're very far off, and so while that's the current vision, like JB said, nothing's set in stone.
Okay. The next question I have is about the boardwalks. People are worried about in the winter. Could they be affected by ice and be taken away?
That is a very good point, and I imagine that they will be affected by ice. And so, again, this is conceptual, and as you move further and further along, you need to drill more and more into those types of details. And quite honestly, to properly answer that question, that requires someone with more specialized knowledge than me, with an engineering background that can calculate or at least predict generally sort of the force of different levels of ice flow would exert on such a structure. What does that mean for the building requirements? Does that, is it still feasible either technically or cost-wise, or does it, become unfeasible from a cost-wise or technical perspective? And that's something that definitely needs to be addressed, but we're sort of not at quite yet in the process. We're not at that level of detail.
Thank you. This question, I'm not sure who to send it to, either Don or maybe JB. Could you answer if the Abenaki Nation, were they asked for any input?
So they've been involved. We've reached out to them for the larger project, which involves this project and also the new bridge. And what I can say, as a result of that, I believe they had some input. I'm not sure if Sean Leary's, I think he might be with us.
Yes, I am.
Yes, and considering some of that information for some signage that's proposed for the new bridge, but I can't recall if it ended up getting into the content.
I can check that file real quick, JB. Hold on 1 second, and I'll throw the answer in the chat.
But it's a really good point, and I think there's absolutely want to have that input as well.
Okay, and that Michael Bosworth asked a question about historical signage, and there is going to be historical signage on the new bridge, Michael, but nothing is proposed at this point for the existing bridges. So I think at this point we can open it up to questions, and I think Bernie Rideout is first.
Okay, thank you. I think I'd just like to say, I think the conception is excellent. But as a selectman in the town of Hinsdale, I do have some concerns about liability and financial responsibility on the town if this moves forward. We currently pay for the electricity on the island now on the bridges, and we currently police them. And anything that goes on around the water in the state of New Hampshire, it's Fish and Game's of New Hampshire's responsibility. So I'd like to know if the town of Hinsdale will not have to accept any financial responsibility for upkeep, removing snow, mowing grass, picking up trash. And I noticed that there's restrooms there. Who's going to clean those, and so on and so forth. That's my concern. Other than that, I think it's design and the concept perfect.
Thank you. I think either JB or perhaps Patrick will be best equipped to speak to your question / concern.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Sorry, everybody. I was gone for, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes or so. I don't know if anybody's had this before, but my internet went out. So I missed the beginning of your question, sir. But I think I understand the basic gist of it, right? Which is who's going to pay for this and who's going to maintain it. Is that about right? Those are good and real questions. I don't have an answer for you. And in fact, nobody on this subcommittee does. What I can tell you is that the island is presently owned by the state of New Hampshire. And as I said earlier on in my comments in the introduction, it's unclear to us who is going to move this forward and who is going to operate it and maintain it. We've been asked as a committee to shepherd a process of developing a vision We think this is a vision that meets with the community standards, but as to who's going to build it and who's going to maintain it, honestly, I don't have an answer for you. I think that's going to be a process of dialogue and discussion and negotiation, probably between the state of Vermont, the state of New Hampshire, the towns of Hinsdale, and the town of Brattleboro. That's who I would imagine would be involved.
I do know through conversation with the town people here in Hinsdale, they do not, to the person, want to take ownership of those 2 bridges.
Excellent.
Okay, I'll ask Alice has the next question.
Thanks. So I'm a bicyclist, and so I'm looking at this right now from a bicycling view, and I noticed very initially, Christopher, with your picture of people walking on the bridge, that there were a lot of pedestrians, and a bicyclist would be competing with pedestrians to be crossing. It was a view from the Anna Hunt Bridge. And I would like to put I'd like to see separation between pedestrians and bicyclists, just like we like separation between motorists and bicyclists. I think it's not safe for either a pedestrian or a bicyclist to have to intermingle the entire length of that bridge, plus the whole greenway, plus the other bridge. So to me, there should be a separated 2-way bike lane for bicyclists to be off, doing their bicycling through at 10 miles an hour while people can walk leisurely and not feel afraid that they're going to be hit or that they have to get out of somebody's way. So have you taken that into consideration? Because it doesn't seem it. That's why I'm asking.
Thanks for bringing that up, Alice. And it's certainly a good and important point. So it currently is not being proposed. And again, this is a good point, and I think should be thought about more, and perhaps it'll be changed in future iterations. It's currently not proposed that there's a hard dividing line separating the 2 types of traffic. And I think partially that's because the use level of the bridge as an island on sort of a non-event basis. That rendering was of a very busy day, when you have a lot of people coming to the island, would be relatively low, and the paths are relatively wide. Across the bridges, the paths for movement are 12 feet wide, and on the greenway, the main spine, the narrowest it gets is 15 feet wide. But again, it's certainly a good point. It's certainly important to think about both pedestrian and bike safety when you have intermingling use, and I think it's something that should be kept in mind moving forward.
Chris, if I could add to that, Alice, I think one of the things that I was conceptualizing when Chris did this design is kind of like a multi-use path. If you've ever been to Keene, where they, the more built out parts of the path where it's, there's traffic, everybody stays on the right-hand side, but the pedestrians and the bicyclists share a lane until the bicyclists can pass. And I think that's kind of the idea here. But please let us know if that's not something that you would be comfortable with as a bicyclist.
Thank you. The next question is from Celine.
Hi, so I joined you in the last meeting. I'm the property owner for 17 Mountain Road. I think the vision is wonderful, and I appreciate the work that you've all done. I absolutely support the development of, or proposed development of the island, so that it doesn't become an attraction for maybe some more nefarious uses or just fall into disrepair. As I raised in the last meeting, my concerns lie primarily and only with the proposed development abutting Mountain Road, which, Chris, I thank you for addressing that this evening in your presentation, that we would need to rework that. I just also want to know, in addition to the property line not being entirely accurate to the surveys on file, the portion that is under the ownership of the state of New Hampshire, which is depicted on the map here as sort of a grayed out area, I believe, for stormwater drainage. That parcel, my property retains the reversionary rights for that property as it was taken, I believe, back in 1984 for highway purposes. So I do intend to exercise those reversionary rights once that time comes. So I don't feel that any sort of, kayak access or anything over that parcel is feasible because of those rights. And I think while we have multiple other kayak entrance points, is it really necessary to disturb an undisturbed part of the bank of the river, which is what that parcel is now? And then perhaps, we could consider whether we can, maybe expand some parking up top by the Charles Dana Bridge where 119 is now, if there would be some room for parking there instead of, up by Runnings, if that would be another spot where people could use to access the island.
Celine, thanks for coming again. And again, thanks for the feedback. We appreciated it last meeting and in this meeting as well. I think your idea for looking into additional parking, sort of where the existing Route 119 footprint is definitely one that has a lot of merit, I think should be pursued. I also think that, moving forward, you'll certainly be included in conversations, regarding any sort of proposal that is close to or directly abuts either your current property line or the, I'm going to butcher it, the exclusion.
Reversionary, yeah.
Thank you. Reversionary rights on the parcel that at least partially, maybe entirely includes the proposed stormwater feature that DOT is handling.
Yes, I certainly appreciate that. And then also to kind of echo Selectman Bernie, I believe, I'm also concerned equally about the cost of maintaining this and who will police the parking and who will, pick up the trash and that sort of thing. While I absolutely support this development, I just want to be sure that it's not too impactful on our taxes because Hinsdale already has the 6th highest tax rate in New Hampshire, and it's quite painful. And I don't want to increase that really in any way, but obviously that's a discussion for another time.
And just, Celine, if I might just jump in, I can absolutely assure you that those concerns are going to make it into the final report.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We'll hear from Chris Chapman.
Hi. Hey, I have a comment before I ask a couple of questions. And the comment is that this gets more and more exciting the more we see it, the more we see these renderings and the more specific and refined the concepts are. I see this as extremely valuable, both in the short run and the long run, to both communities, both Brattleboro and Hinsdale. And will make both communities much more attractive than they are now to travelers and people looking to just find a wonderful place to spend time, and perhaps to relocate their homes and businesses in the region, really transforming the value of this area. I love how the concept goes deeply into Brattleboro to the Union Park Plaza, the roundabout, or rather the five-way intersection, and all the way down into Hinsdale's pathways, which go right into the heart of town. It just seems very sensitively and comprehensively imagined, and what has been largely a marginal feature is going to be a real public amenity of great value. I just wanted to compliment everyone involved in this. The UMass program, I think, has been an ingenious addition to this, to the committee, to the committee's deliberations. My compliments to the committee and to the UMass planning people. And so let me get to my questions. I did write a question a little bit earlier about what I saw as orange treatment of the bridges, which is far superior to the faded light green that they are now. And it seems to really, as I looked at those, respect the historic quality of those bridges and the historic impact those bridges have on the economic connection between the two towns and the cultural one too. And I really appreciate that. I was wondering if the orange that is shown there was is what someone has determined to be the most practical color. Is it what the designers, the planners feel is the optimum color for those bridges? I mean, I'm fine with orange because anything is better than the light green faded that we have now. And the other question I have is, how practical is it to envision the dam owners funding both the construction and maintenance of the island concepts? I did ask this earlier and I got a response from JB Mack and I didn't quite understand what gets in the way. What are the issues in the way of having that done? Because as I understand it, the dam owners have an obligation to, that's defined under their licensing to provide recreational access and to maintain that access. And it seems to me a perfect opportunity. What would get in the way of having them both fund the construction and maintain the result? So 2 questions. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took so much time asking. But I just couldn't help myself on my enthusiasm here. I just think it's one of the most fabulous things to happen to Brattleboro along the river and to the river near the two towns in generations.
Well, I can briefly speak to your first question, and I'll let someone else on the either committee or in planning speak to your second one regarding funding. Regarding the specific color you saw in illustrations, that either it's showing up as orange or an orange, more of a reddish tint depending on your screen. That was just a personal choice of mine. And it's not to say that I think this is the color, nothing else will work with the design. It's more to convey the idea that I'm thinking about these bridge superstructures as a really important asset and calling it out through the repainting that will be done as part of the rehabilitation of the bridges is an important design decision to be made. And I believe that's a decision that should be made by members of the community, perhaps, through the subcommittee or another committee involved in this project. But as to the specific color shown in these pictures, it was me deciding that because I thought it looked nice. I thought it worked, and it definitely helped drive the point home as to sort of it's an important design decision. Yeah. And I'll let someone else speak to your second question regarding funding of the project.
I can try to start to answer the question, although I have responded to Chris's question in the past. Our understanding, and this has been confirmed by Kathy Erfer over at Connecticut River Conservancy, is that there's a window of time in which you can make these requests, and that window of opportunity hasn't occurred yet. But it's a terrific idea. I think it's as you've heard tonight from Bernie Rideout and others talking about looking for creative ways to finance this other than the towns, that it's a great idea that should be pursued. It's on my radar, and I'll try to make sure that it's on the town's radar. Kathy Erfer has assured me that she would keep us posted as to when that window opens, and we can make a request as part of the relicensing process.
JB? Yeah,
Hi,
that's
Chris.
it. Right now, what Great River Hydro has proposed is basically maintaining the recreation facilities that they already have. So that's what their intent is right now.
But it's my understanding that there'll be perhaps later this summer, there'll be another opportunity to provide input according to
right,
that.
absolutely. But I'm just saying right now their intent is to support what they've got. And but this is a situation where there will be an opportunity for communities, for individuals, for groups to comment coming up this summer. But that request is not something that can like wait a year. That's gonna, and it would probably be beneficial like to have a common position between the two towns in support of that request to Great River Hydro. And ultimately it's a request to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So it's something that that would need to be deliberated upon, in the coming months or two to start that process of making that request, I think. So I'm just saying, we've got a while before, this overall project is ever going to be developed or anything like that. It's going to be used as a bridge for automotives and all for quite some time. But that's a decision, that request of Great River Hydro is something that's going to happen, in months, not years.
Well, that's great to know. Thank you very much. I'm wondering, is it possible to make an estimate of the costs involved of these, wonderful ideas that have come up, or break out the cost for each one, so that if there's some kind of compromise that has to be made, then we can also have priorities we've agreed on. Okay, we first want this, we second want that, and this is a third, or this is a fourth priority. Like, for example, the picnic space, or the amphitheater, the kayak launch. I'm wondering about the process of actually making a proposal or a request that has some detail in it that can be put right in front of the decision makers of what will be funded and what won't be. By the dam owners, if FERC decides, yep, you're on the hook for something here, buddies. So I'm wondering if there's any plan to cost out these cool ideas that we've been seeing tonight. I gather that the bridge paint would be part of the bridge project, but everything else, it seems to me, would be over and above what the bridge project is going to cover. Is that right?
That is actually correct, Chris. It's me again. I just wanted to speak to a couple of the points. Yes, I believe the repainting of the bridges and the refurbishing of the existing bridges is part of the Hinsdale Bridge project, whereas the developments that are being envisioned on the island would be a separate project. I want to give a shout out to Kathy Erfer for raising the relicensing and the ideas to us at the last meeting. She gave us actually a couple of different ideas, that places where she thought or recommended that our final report should go, to include our legislative delegation, and also to the folks involved with the relicensing. And we took notes of that and want to make sure that our final report gets into the hands of as many people who might be interested in seeing it pursued as possible. But directly to your question about costs, I believe our thinking is to try and include sort of order of magnitude costs. Obviously, there's a lot of things that can add to the cost of a project, But, you know, I think our intention at this point in time is to show a range of potential costs, right? What would it look like, for example, if we put in fully plumbed bathrooms? What would it look like if we put in composting bathrooms, right? And just give a sort of order of magnitude for what some of these different things could cost. In terms of prioritizing, I think that's really needs to be led by the elected officials or the officials who would be deciding what's important and what to move forward with.
If I could interject, Michael Abbott, member of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and I can tell you that Senator Jeanne Shaheen got $11.2 million to repair these bridges. But I think the bottom line is who is going to maintain them. And again, this is not the Hinsdale Island. This is a state of New Hampshire's property. And as far as maintenance of this property goes, I think you're going to have to look elsewhere, as Selectman Rideout said, for funding for that. I don't think the folks in Hinsdale are going to be open to funding that.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to Dave Trombley.
Yep, thank you. I was just about to tell you something. Just wanted to say I'm the current president of the Brattleboro Outing Club, and we are very excited about this this project that's taking place. We have two programs, a paddling program and also a row BOC, which is a sculling program. And we have our location on the West River near the marina. And we are very much looking to expand our programs and get more youth involved and what have you. I just wanted to say, please keep us in the loop on what the plans are that unfold here, because we like to see what we can do to support this project and be involved with it as well. So I just wanted to thank you very much. I echo Chris Chapman's sentiments and a lot of other people's sentiments as well, that I think this is a great project for the community. And it's something that's really long overdue, and it looks like a lot of thought's gone into this. And again, anything that that the BOC can do to help from a recreational standpoint, please let us know.
Thank you so much, Dave.
Thanks.
Michael Bosworth had a question. Michael, you're on mute. There you go.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So I want to follow up my earlier comment in the chat, just partly with a question. I did not go to the earlier public sessions. So somebody responded that there will be historical signage on the new bridge. So is that part of that reflective of the, the stadium that used to be on the island? So it's a question, also a comment. Part of what I brought up was there's important history from the 17th century that reached up here from King Philip's War. And I agree with Al Sharks, who made a comment that it's pretty tricky to get into that. There's a professor, Lisa Brooks, down at Amherst College, who is herself part Abenaki, who wrote a book focusing on the female viewpoint, both of the captive and the captor in the captivity of Mary Rowlandson. So I'm just thinking, if there are any thoughts about some historic signage related, at least get that into people's thinking. That's as another possible reference.
Thank you, Michael. I think our intent, our full intent, I'm the planner for Hinsdale, and Sue Fillon is the planner for the town of Brattleboro. And we did put together a couple signs that they talk about the Wantasecut Mountain, the ancient lake, and native fish. And I think our intent was to possibly in the future create a loop with additional signage. Sue, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, thanks. That's why I had raised my hand for 2 points, but one of them was to talk about the signage. I'm Sue Fillion. I'm the planning director for Brattleboro. I also sit on the New Bridge Committee. And so Catherine's right. She and I worked on signage. I took some direction from the Brattleboro Planning Commission about what topics we wanted to focus on for the sign that we produced. There was a question earlier about Abenaki consultation. We did speak with a representative for the sign that we were doing, which focuses on the natural environment, like Catherine said, the fish species, the mountain, and some other aspects. And we did have a piece in there about Abenaki, and the feedback that we got was a concern that the Abenaki are still very much present, and putting it in a historical light seemed a little insensitive. So at that point, we decided to take that off of our signage, knowing what Catherine had discussed. We kind of see this as a loop with lots of additional opportunities for signage. So it would be more appropriate to have one panel that maybe focuses on the Abenaki and their care for the land they call home. The other point that I wanted to make was follow up to Chris Chapman's comment. There actually is a stakeholder meeting on Monday at 1 with the Connecticut River Conservancy, where outdoor recreational groups from both sides of the river are going to be getting together to kind of talk about how do they make some requests in the relicensing procedure. So I'll share this with my colleague who will be attending. And I'm not sure if anybody else will be at that meeting, anybody from the Wyndham Regional Commission or maybe some other organization that's here tonight. Thanks.
We'll have some representation there from Wyndham Regional.
Thank you so much. I'm not seeing any further questions or hands held. JB?
Yeah, so I really appreciate the turnout tonight. I appreciate the great questions. All of the chat questions will be recorded, and the video will be recorded as well. So great comments tonight, really good ideas. We plan to take those and integrate those into our report that Patrick Moreland was talking about earlier tonight, which we hope to put together this summer. That will pass on to the 2 select boards, so the communities, 2 planning boards, and start talking to other stakeholders that might be interested in this project. So thanks everyone for coming out. And if you want to stay track of this project, we do have, if you go to www.swrpc.org, there's a link on the front page that says Hinsdale-Brattleboro Planning, and you can get in touch with us and let us know if you want to be on a email list so we can keep you posted on progress with this project. Thanks again, everyone, and everyone have a great evening.